Hello. I've been thinking of my grandmother lately, and I don't remember her having a job outside of the house. Being a homemaker was her job, and, loving us grandkids. But that was a different time. Now, grandmothers aren't just loving family members, they can also be powerful community change makers. So today's episode explores a movement that's reshaping how we see older women, not as fading figures in the background, but as vital forces for connection, wisdom, and lasting change. I'm joined today by Lindsay Farrell. She's a cultural anthropologist and co-founder and executive director of the Grandmother Collective, which is a global initiative that elevates the voice, power, and leadership of grandmothers. Now, here's what's interesting. Lindsay didn't set out to create a grandmother movement. For over 2 decades, she worked closely with young people in communities around the world, from Nairobi to Washington, D.C., focused on self-help, leadership, and empowerment. But over time, Lindsay noticed something, that despite all the energy and innovation in youth programs, something essential was missing. The grounding, the wisdom, the steady hands that hold a community together. And who was already doing that? Quietly, consistently, and often invisibly? Grandmothers. That realization sparked the Grandmother Collective, which now supports older women around the world who are leading storytelling circles, raising awareness around social issues, building intergenerational trust, and healing their communities. In today's conversation, we'll explore why grandmothers matter more than ever, how you can tap into your own grandmotherly influence, whether or not you have grandchildren, and learn about the impact that grandmothers are having around the world. Lindsay's here to share the origin of this movement, stories of real women leading change, and, like I said, how you can connect with your community and own the wisdom that comes with age. Hi, I'm Wendy Green, your host for Boomer Banter, where we have real talk about aging well, and I am so glad that you joined us today. Just a quick reminder before we get started, because I don't want you to miss anything. I want to have you go to the heyboomer.biz webpage and click on Age Well with Us. Why do I want you to do that? Because if you're enjoying these episodes with my inspiring guests and you want a little extra inspiration each week, I'd love to have you join my email community. Every week, you'll get a link to new episodes, helpful resources, and some thoughts to help you navigate this season of life with purpose and confidence. So again, go to heyboomer.biz, click on Age Well with Us, and I look forward to having you join us. So let me bring Lindsay on, and welcome, Lindsay, to Boomer Banter.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm very excited about this show. I've been looking at your website. There's just so much going on. But before we get there, I want to get a little bit of history about you, your anthropological fieldwork, and what made you realize that older women were a hidden force for change.
Yeah, so sometimes I go all the way back and tell people that I grew up in the suburbs of Phoenix, which I think kind of was to somebody who was really interested in diversity and somehow emerged in my young life as really trying to understand how the human condition could be so different and how people everywhere had different belief systems and different symbols and different languages. I think growing up in a relatively homogenous culture in the suburbs of Phoenix, I could either have followed the status quo or have gone and done dramatically different things. And I sort of ended up taking that pathway. So I studied abroad in Zimbabwe when I was an undergraduate.
Oh, wow.
And had an incredibly pivotal kind of experience, transformational. Now, this is before we had internet, but it was so slow. I mean, we tell our parents like one thing, then
Right.
there were no cell phones. And so, I mean, we were as immersed as you could be. And I, at that point, was, living on a continent that has 65, 70% population below the age of 35. I had myself been a product of a lot of youth development programming and understand how youth life, especially in urban spaces in an emergent continent, was shaping what culture looked like and how, the future looked like for people there. And so after I graduated, I ended up in Kenya on a Fulbright scholarship.
Oh, gosh.
A lot of time with young people who were politically engaged during this like really politically important time in Kenya when they were moving away from having a single leader who was authoritarian in nature. I mean, they still kind of have some problems with that, but like there was this emergent youth energy and a desire to bring a new kind of leadership. And then my dissertation research in cultural anthropology in Nairobi, Kenya, in a settlement called Kibera, which is the largest in the city, very low socioeconomic class, but really deep-rooted history, but a very youth-oriented population, not a lot of older adults guiding and leading. I kind of went on this pathway to understand that how the city became an education for youth. And that sort of led me down, more nonprofit work. But in 2016 or 17, I met a woman named Judy Abel from an organization called the Grandmother Project. So it sounds similar to ours, but it's based in southern Senegal. It's an amazing project. And she was talking about, she drew this we were at a conference that I had been leading, this workshop, and she was drawing out the initiative that they were doing, and she was drawing between the different members of a community. Like we have to address the elders, we have to address the young boys. I mean, towards the youth and towards girls empowerment, really trying to solve some of the kind of systemic things that were happening for young girls in southern Senegal, like female genital mutilation, early forced marriage, being sent off at 14 or 16 to be a child bride.
Yeah.
And she was drawing these are all the people we have to influence. And all of this work that I've been doing on trying to find sort of the systemic way to support youth, she had discovered, really, I guess, uncovered or, remembered. I don't know what it is. But
what's the right word?
Older women in that community who could stand up in front of a group of elder men and say no. And they were not going to be there's some kind of power that comes with older women. They can shame in incredible ways. We have clear, there's clear examples in history where a group of older women will stop things from happening, or they are protested a particular way and they're really powerful. So she was let's tap into that, get those women on board as co-leaders, and really significantly shift the way that this community is supporting its girls or these communities. And so there's some statistic, it's really good. Prior to the intervention in the communities that they've operated in, Grandmother Projects operated in southern Senegal, it's 90% of mothers and grandmothers felt it was obligatory to take girls through circumcision or female genital mutilation.
90% of the mothers thought that?
We're yes, this is what we do. This is our culture. This is what we have to do. Mm-hmm. And after interventions, it's in the single digits of who think it's obligatory, because they are on the journey, they're being taken along, and because they possess such a power in their culture that they're able to shift it.
And so the older grandmothers are listened to not just by the women, the mothers, but also by the men.
By everyone. Everyone
That's
listens
amazing.
to a grandma. And we know that's true. You can think of an older woman in your life that when she speaks, everyone goes, yeah, I get, I'm not going to piss off grandma, And it sort of seems to hold. There's little, things here and there about the mother-in-law being a problem or the this or that being a problem. But for the most part, it holds pretty universally that as women age, and they especially emerge out of menopause and become, like not seen so much as a potential partner or as a sexual being, maybe, that they gain a wisdom and power that people can't really touch anymore. And for the most part, you hear them say, yeah, I'm like in my 50s and I don't care anymore. Like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
There is a shift.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a shift where you're not so influenced by the people around you and the culture. You are standing in your own strength and your own confidence of, this is who I am. And if you're either going to like it or not,
Yeah.
So there is a shift that does happen. You're right.
Yeah. You're not worried about your reputation. You probably don't like your livelihood's okay for the most part. And if it's not, you'll figure it out. Like, you're not, I have women tell me the day they retired, they put up a sign in their yard.
A sign in their yard that said what? I'm sorry, you went out for a minute.
That might be that might be like very progressive. Like, I know a woman in Arkansas who joined Planned Parenthood of Arkansas the day she retired.
Oh yeah.
Because at that point, she, like, no one was going to fire her, and she could speak out for something she really, really believed in. And prior to retirement, there's always the fear that you're going to affect your livelihood or affect your family or your children or what people think about everyone around you. And by the time you've grown older, you have independence from that too.
So you get this insight from this amazing woman. And then you go home and say, oh, you know what? I think I'll start something with grandmothers.
It took a while. No, I joined her board. And there's just more year after year. It was so clear that we needed to tell a story of grandmothers at a global scale. And we started to meet other organizations that had grandmother as their center. Like, there's an organization that gets a lot of press, so hopefully people have heard of it, called the Friendship Bench, which is an organization that started in Zimbabwe. And Dixon Chibando is a psychologist, recognized that in order to deal with a really big crisis of mental health in his country, in a place that had a dearth of mental health workers, if he could train older women and grandmothers to be that source, they're a trusted source. They did it in public places, so there was no stigma attached to going to a therapist, and it's made this dramatic shift. So we meet like a Dixon and we meet a Judy, and my co-founder and I are both board members. Really felt like there's got to be more out there, and they're not talking to each other. We know that there's no like grandmother, older woman, unity. And then it turns out, as we start to explore and pull people in, there's grandmothers for reproductive rights. There's grandmothers for gun responsibility. There's grandmothers. Oh, there's so many grandmothers doing climate change work. Mm-hmm. And what we know is that, A, they're not seen and they're really invisible. So what could we do to raise some visibility? B, funding for grandmother work is basically non-existent. Right? Nobody's saying like, let's give them money. And they often need like a little bit of money, like very little, to like make these big kind of things in the world. So we wanted to be a platform to raise some visibility around that and see if we could shift some things.
So the collective then is bringing all of these various groups together and starting to share information and resources and communities and
and inspiring each other. We just really started to like write up the models. So I think we're at 34 organizational members, and those organizational members have a lot of different ways in which they make change in the world. But we were really trying to understand like what was unique to the grandmother or older woman approach. So we've written up some things, we've done some research. We did a research project in the beginning of the year that really focused on the role that older women play in crisis. And no one's really thought about it specifically as like grandmothers in refugee camps often get picked out as to help distribute food.
Is that right?
They're like, there was a research project that was done in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya a few years ago, where like they become the go-to trusted resource in a place where everybody is not trusting, right? Yeah. You know that you can bring a grandmother in. They do the same in climate crises. They do the same in migrant crises. Like they're really playing this very visible role. So we've just been trying to like collect and create a base of evidence to be able to support this, as well as bring people together.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many different ways that it can work. So talk to me about what this grandmotherly approach is beyond just age. What defines that for you?
Yeah, so I've been talking, I like to tell people that I want to teach a class one day at a business school called How to Lead Like Mighty, Badass, some kind of grandma, right? Yeah, how to lead like a grandmother. And it's some of the stuff that you would think they're effective because they approach things with empathy. They're effective because they approach things with compassion. But they're also effective because of those things that we were talking about, like having a recognition and realization that with age comes a particular freedom and independence. And that is something, you know, as you're young and moving up in leadership, you're calculating, I think, a lot more than grandmothers seem to calculate. They're not really worried about power in the same way. And I think there's something incredibly, I think if you talk to people in our community, they would agree. It is so cooperative and giving. Like there's just so much in the approach that it's not like there's not a lot of gatekeeping. Like everyone's just trying to make a change. No one's trying to get rich. No one's trying to like even build a livelihood. And so you have these sort of authentic interactions and connections that I think are incredibly grandmotherly. I think there's also, now this is like, we've kind of explored this a little bit, and the anthropologist in me, something very sacred about older women, right? Like you can see globally, they can be goddesses and they can be witches. Like there is something, they can be, you know, they're sort of dangerous, and that has been reflected in folklore and all kinds of things around the world. And it's an intangible thing that's almost difficult to describe. But, you know, we have these archetypes of older women that actually lead to this power in their leadership.
So I'm curious, you know, so much of your work was done in Africa, and in very impoverished areas.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the grandmother image there is different in the way they practice their power, let's say, as opposed to the grandmother image here in the Western world?
Well, I'll say two things on that. Yes, the respect for elders is higher, right? Like they haven't necessarily done as much damage to the idea of what it means to grow old as our individualist, youth-oriented society. Certainly, every young person, like, you know, there's even in like the language in Swahili, in Tanzanian Swahili, depends on where you are on the continent, but in Tanzanian Swahili, when you greet a grandmother or a grandfather, you say shikamo, and you know, you sort of bow, and that means like I kiss your feet. Like there's this deference, right? That's like immediate. This is something you can see, like an older generation here in the US will be like, why are the children not understanding? But like we haven't really taught that same sort of level of deference and things. So that still exists for sure. But urbanization is starting to kill some of that for sure on the continent and in other collectivist societies that we know of. You know, they're growing up in youth-saturated communities without the wisdom and experience and leadership of older people. You know, when you have 75% of the population below the age of 35, that starts to do a number on the relationship and connection between generations. And so I think they are at risk of kind of going down the same pathway as us, but we also have an opportunity to redefine aging. And I think that's what we're really trying to focus on at the Grandmother Collective. And I know groups here in the United States, you've probably even connected with them, that are really thinking about how do we reframe elderhood? How do we take back the responsibility? Like elderhood is not, being an elder is not assumed, like you should earn it, that you need to be responsible to your community and step up in particular ways in order to be considered an elder. It like goes both ways. It's not just teaching the young to respect the elders, but it's teaching our elders to reevaluate the role that they're supposed to be playing as community leaders.
Right. Not to say, oh, well, I'm too old now. No, this is our opportunity to really have an impact. And I mean, that's what I'm hoping to do through this show.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the initiatives. Like I was reading about Tea for Change. I was reading about the local learning circles in Philadelphia. And then of course this global symposium. So tell me about those and how they cultivate change.
Well, we developed the Tea for Change, and it's kind of evolved. We developed that as a kind of a tool for anyone who is trying to figure out how to start a conversation with their community or with their peers, that starts to take them, to think about grandmothers and think about their roles differently. And actually, I'll tell you what evolved. If anyone has seen Known As on Netflix.
Oh yes, y'all did that. We had a watch party.
Yeah, so we developed, and I think the Tea for Change is like better in the watch party version. But we developed with like this larger sort of coalition, developed a watch party discussion guide, really using Known As, which is celebrating these Italian grandmothers and like the role that they can play in building like a very community-centered restaurant in Staten Island, as a launch pad for saying, what can you do? Like, do you see, first off, that you don't need to hide and be invisible anymore? And what's the next step that you can take to lead discussions and start small? Like, some of our grandmothers are just standing out on street corners on Fridays, like raising awareness about something political. Like not everyone's like, building nonprofits or starting new things, but really trying to find a way to feel a contribution and have a purpose. Then you talked about the learning circles. So actually those Philadelphia learning circles evolved into an we're fiscally sponsoring them for now, but a new initiative called Grandmas for Literacy, which got some funding this year. So that's really great. And it's going to, in Philadelphia, where I live, we have a really pretty poor literacy rate. I think something like 33%, 35% of kids are reading at grade level.
Wow. Okay.
In the public schools here. Yeah. And we also have an adult literacy problem. So, this is it's inherited.
Sure.
And so the Grandmas for Literacy are working on a science-based reading approach to enable older women to understand, like to really feel the power of using a science-based approach to training on literacy. And there's kind of two pathways that are emerging: the grandmas that want to like go to the school board and yell, like, and be very effective, like as grandmothers, and then those who want to like get into schools and actually be community grandmothers in these schools. And for the most part, what the schools need more than anything is just more people, and having grandmothers and older women kind of watching out and knowing the kids can make an incredibly huge difference. And so they're really focusing on putting grandmothers into the local schools and where they live, like really matchmaking and seeing how to build those relationships better. Yeah. So that started because I interviewed someone for my podcast, and then she was like, I want to talk to more grandmas. And she's everywhere now. She's spending the summer senior centers and libraries and everything, just getting grandmas thinking about the ways in which they can
She's motivated. She's motivated.
She's so motivated. And then let me tell you about the symposium. So last year we were kind of reaching a tipping point, right? We've collected all these amazing organizations. We've tested out a few different ways to engage the community, but we wanted to see what they would do if they were at this opportunity to say, let's like build an institution focused on older women's leadership. And we held a 2-day symposium. We brought 100 women together. We brought together academics. We've like scoured, the scholarship to see who's writing specifically about grandmothers, and it's not that many, but we've pulled people together. We pulled in some funders. We pulled in all of these incredible grandmother change makers from around the country, the world. We had a very global connection. And the first day was focused just on like, let's prove to you that this is a thing, right? That there's an actual thing here that grandmothers are driving change, and we could see it in all of these very disparate ways. And then the second day we talked about how we're going to build this together. And what emerged was that we needed a membership, that we needed individual grandmothers to find a way to connect, and that we needed a base of evidence. And the final thing is we needed to change the narrative. And so I have a whole group of older women now based off of that, who are really thinking a lot about how to support each other, to tell stories, to tell their stories, but also the story of older women. And so that's kind of, that really has provided a great base for us for making this emergent, but also making it a collective, like people, are
so it's individuals, because it started out as a collective of organizations.
Right.
And now you're bringing individuals in. So tell me about that. Like, I joined that story circle.
Yeah.
Which was really fun and
it
interesting.
was awesome. Yeah.
So tell me about some of the things you're doing with the individuals.
We do those monthly. So there's a monthly storytelling circle that anyone can come and tell a story, but also just attending. It's maybe my favorite night of the month, like just to hear. It's so diverse. Sometimes somebody sings or tells like a folk story, but oftentimes it's personal. But there's really, what we've kept hearing from our community is that there was no space just to let older women speak to each other and talk about a variety of things. I think a lot of the work with older people tells them that they have to tell like a legacy story or a life lesson or some other kinds of thing. And sometimes you just want to be human and be who you are in the moment. Like it's, so that's what has really created that. And it's creating like a little vibrant community. And off of that is a group called the Wabi Sabi Writers. And that's a writers group. And Wabi Sabi, it means like perfectly imperfect or whatever, right? It's like this Japanese concept of impermanence. And so they're perfectly imperfect, the Wabi Sabi Writers. And we're trying to shepherd them into publications and get them into, so that we're really shifting this narrative out in the world. And but what we're hoping in the fall, so we're launching an individual membership in the fall, which is where people can actually like sign up and say, I'm a member, right? They already call themselves a member, which is awesome. But we just have all these individual women who haven't started something yet, or they belong to 4 things, but they only want to, they want to come to us to bandy around ideas or meet more people that are like-minded. Actually, change making is incredibly lonely. So you often find that the women that find us are in some community. They're not necessarily finding people that have the same values or ideas or passions, right? So it sort of becomes this. I mean, we have a woman join us from Singapore really regularly, and I just imagine she just feels such a kinship. She gets up in the middle of the night to join stuff.
That's
right?
Amazing.
It's amazing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to offer a membership where people can sign up to be a member of the Grandmother Collective for a really small fee, or not at all. We're going to do it on a sliding scale. We don't want anyone to not feel that they can be part of it, but we do have some operating costs that would be nice to cover. And as part of that membership, they're going to be able to join workshops, which we're developing. Things like, how do you use AI for movement building, or Google Docs for collaboration, which is really helpful. But a lot of our community, you can imagine, just doesn't. They want to be in a space where they can ask the questions that they make them feel stupid when it comes to things like technology and things like that. So we're going to build out a series of workshops. We have an opportunity to feature folks in webinars, which will be starting sometime this summer on various issue areas related to grandmothers. Like there's going to be one on food traditions and food ways. We'll do one on grandmothers and education. We've done a few already webinars. Members will also have access to a platform and membership directory so they can find each other. The number one thing that happens at every Grandmother Collective event, and we have these monthly coffee chats, there'll be one tomorrow. Anyone can join.
Okay.
And the number one thing that happens is the chat fills up with email me, email me, email me, email me. And so we've created a platform that people can connect with each other. There's an email listserv. There's a way to make subgroups for different issue areas.
So let's share your website though, if they want to sign up for the coffee chat or if they want to sign up for a storytelling circle.
Yeah, all of that's on the front page of the website.
So it's grandmothercollective.org.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so check it out. There's so much on there.
Yeah, it needs a little. Some of that stuff is going to move behind the wall from membership, like our resources and stuff, pretty soon. So, but right now, literally everything we've ever thought about exists on the website. Yeah.
So, Lindsay, what has surprised you the most in your role with the Grandmother Collective, and how has it reshaped your idea of what a grandmother means?
You know, the organization emerged as I became a mother. Mm-hmm. So I was already sort of having a lens on like the power of like my mother is a really kind of archetypal grandmother. Like the kids all listen to her. She can get them to do anything. They'll eat food that they won't eat with me. Right. And I think so I wasn't surprised, that I was able to see sort of a personal connection with the idea of this power of grandmothers. But so this is actually really personal. I think the thing that has surprised me so much in doing this work is because I'm not a grandmother, I'm getting a view on aging that I didn't expect.
I bet you are.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. And I'm in a period of life where I'm still thinking about a career and what my future holds. And I'm parenting, and there's a modicum of stress with all of that is seems to be totally accepted in our society. And there's an urgency to get things done. And I think since starting this work with grandmothers, I have been able to give myself a lot more grace. I think I've interviewed enough women, and they'll say, I didn't hit my stride till I was 65. Or I got a late start because of all the stuff that life has thrown at me. And then you meet a 96-year-old woman who still goes out and marches,
Yeah.
And I think it just reminds me life is long. You can remake yourself many, many times.
You sure can.
You do not have to judge yourself based on others. And all of us have a contribution to make at any age and at any, skill level. We all have something to give and contribute in society.
You are very lucky to be getting all of that insight now, because most people, when we're raising our kids, that's what we're doing. We're working, we're raising our kids, we're paying bills. We're just on this rat race, this hamster wheel that just keeps going until you finally take a break and take a breath and go, what do I really want? Who do I really want to be,
Mm-hmm.
And so you're getting insight into that now, which is very cool.
I mean, ideally for me, the Grandmother Collective is an intergenerational movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did this intergenerational course a couple of years ago, and we had some young ones, 20-somethings.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them messaged me the other day and said, I still keep thinking about all of the things, the insights that I got. She had been paired up with this woman they're probably in her 60s, and the two of them have become friends. And, we have so much insight to gain across the generations. And I don't know, Cogenerate and the work
Yeah,
of,
sure. Yep.
yeah. And, they always talk about age segregation and how kind of terrible that's been for our society. It shouldn't
Mhm.
come. It shouldn't come as a surprise to me that I can live a long life and change my mind. But also, I think the generation, maybe the boomers, have given us also a different lens to that. That you can try new things,
You
and
absolutely can try new things.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there's not just some like retirement home waiting for you at the end of all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is awesome. So
Yeah.
tell me, I want to share how people can find you, but give me some ideas on what people can do if they want to start to get involved or learn more about what the Grandmother Collective is doing.
Well, we have a website, of course, grandmothercollective.org, and on there are some really easy sort of entry spaces. So we talked about the storytelling circle. Anyone can join that. We talked about the coffee chat, which is just for anyone looking to talk to other people who are making change in the world in a variety of different ways. It really can be anything from from tutoring in schools, even that. I mean, all of it matters to. We have a woman working on nuclear proliferation, like trying to raise awareness about that. I mean, it's like the scale and depth of the ways in which people contribute is amazing. So come to a coffee chat. There's one tomorrow at noon Eastern. Come to a storytelling circle. I think that'll be in a couple weeks. Join the Wabi Sabi Writers. And then, once we have this membership, and, if you haven't sign up for the newsletter, which is at the bottom of the website, you'll see when we're ready to officially, formally launch the membership, which it should be a real avenue to getting to a lot of women that are like-minded.
Well, I want to encourage people to do this too, because we've been talking all month about friendships and connections. And, I popped into that storytelling circle. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't tell a story. I just listened. And yet I could tell this was a group of women that were very connected, very supportive. And, if you are feeling isolated and you feel like you just don't know how to contribute and start to give back again, and maybe even getting out of the house is difficult. This is a great way to get started with building a community that feels supportive and safe and empowered. So
yeah,
I really appreciate what you're doing, Lindsay.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you felt that, because when I say generosity of grandmother leadership, that is a big piece of it, and it just shows up every time.
Yeah. If you have specific questions, you can email Lindsay directly at Lindsay, that's Lynnsey, at grandmothercollective.org. So she's very graciously offered to share her email address too, Lindsay, Lynnsey, at grandmothercollective.org. I mean, we could talk for hours. There's so much to take to ask you, but yeah, maybe we'll have you back.
Oh, please have me back, or better yet, I'd send you someone from the collective who.
Ooh, that would be fun.
A very specific, a passionate thing that they're working on, because I could pluck so many incredible.
Oh, I bet you could. Yeah.
Yeah.
And listeners, if this episode resonated with you, please be sure to share it. Share it with a friend, leave a comment, tell me what you're taking away from the conversation. Really, it just would make my day to hear from you. And if you're not already on our email list, it's a great way to stay in the loop with what Boomer Banter is doing. So go to the website, heyboomer.biz, and click on Age Well with Us. And I will start to send you that weekly newsletter. There's so much going on our side too. Okay, before you go, the show on July 7th. This should be interesting. This is about ancestry travel. So my guest, Jim Lenahan, is AARP's go-to travel expert. And many people, it's kind of become a real thing now to be researching your family history. And they've been doing this for years, and they have lots of information, but they've never been to that country of origin. So now they're ready to walk there. where their ancestors walked and meet hopefully some relatives that they never even knew existed. So Jim's going to share some stories with us about people who have taken advantage of ancestry travel. So hope you will tune in next Monday for that. Thank you, Lindsay, so much for this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure. My name is Wendy Green, and thank you all for joining us on Boomer Banter. We'll see you soon.